I talked a little bit about chopping technique in some of my other videos, and a few people asked me if I could do a video with a bit more detail, specifically about chopping in it. So this is going to be a rather short video, and I'm going to just hit on some, tips, tricks, techniques that I've sort of put together over the years about chopping with some of the tools that I like to use. Now, to start off, of course, you need your piece of wood. And generally, one of the good things that I look for in a piece of wood is you get a piece of wood like this that has nails or some other kind of large inclusion in it, because that gives you a point to focus on when you're cutting. Because one of the hardest things, of course, is to place the blade in the same spot each time. And if you have something that really stands out like this big nail, it makes it much easier, because you can cut sort of right where that nail is, and that makes it much easier to hit that spot. So of course, because it's just a visual thing, your eye has to focus on something, and the nail gives you a really good focus point. You can't always get that. I mean, sometimes you have a piece of wood and it's just clear and there's no knots and there's no nails. There's not a lot you can do then. But if you have like a piece of wood that has like large knots or nails or some concrete or something at a particular spot, that's what you're really looking for to get really good performance. Now, the other thing, of course, you need is something to cut the wood with. Now, again, what I'm giving you here is just, my opinion and what works for me, and you got to find the things that works for you, because it's all about, like personal preference and what you find that works really well. So, I mean, you might be the type of person that say something like this. This is, a really decent wooden spoon. This might be the kind of tool that works best for you. So again, you got to keep that in mind. It's, it's opinion, it's personal preference. Different people have different things that are going to work well from, and just because, it works well for me doesn't mean it's going to work well for you. And you always got to keep that in mind, because every now and again, you'll hear someone and they'll be talking about like weight and heft and the amount of taper of the blade and that kind of deal. But again, it's all just opinion and personal preference. You really got to see, what works best for you. So here's one of the tools that I like to use. This is an Excalibur from Gavco, maker on YouTube. For me, I like it when the knife has a handle and it has a blade. I find those things really important. I think you're going to need at least one out of those two things. Opinions might differ on this, but for me, I really like it when it has both, but I think you'll want at least two to make a decent knife, a handle and a blade. The other thing, I like it when it grinds down to an edge. Now again, it's opinion, you got to find out what works best for you, but generally that's what I like. When the part up here is thicker than the part down there, I find that generally works a lot better. Now, there are some decent makers out there who, have only been around for a short time, so they get some of the things right and not everything. So I'm just going to point out a couple of the common mistakes that you'll often see. Now again, I mean, when you find a knife like this, you don't want to be too harsh, because, not everybody can be perfect. Here's an example of one from Kylie Harris. This is the Voyager, and you see this on a table, you see it in a case, and it looks like this could be a decent knife. The problem is, though, as you can see, he put the handle on the wrong side, so like the blade is down here towards you. So you can imagine this would be kind of difficult, because you'd have to sort of hold on to this area. And anyway, I find this really awkward. So it's unfortunate when you get a knife like this, because you got someone who put like a lot of time and effort into it, but they ended up with this. So what are you gonna do? Here's another one from Dan Keffler. Dan has been around a while, great guy. Again, looks like an excellent knife in many respects, but Dan, where I was saying like the top part should be thicker than the sort of bottom part, well, he made it the opposite. So you can see the top part is really thin and the bottom part is really thick. I find, and again, this is just telling you what works for me, it's not like there's a science behind this and the knife is actually acting like a wedge, which is going into something which is two opposing wedge, which is sort of held together by Hooke's law. It's not anything at all like that, so just talking about personal preference. But for me, like, I find knives like this don't work very well at all, because I just can't get the penetration when, this part is thicker than this part. So that's unfortunate. It's a good knife, but the good thing is, even though, someone like Dan, where he made a knife like this, he said, man, that's no problem. If you can send this back to me, he said, I'll have it back to you in a week and I'll turn it around where it goes the other way like you want. So he's a great guy, man, and he said he'll do that for me. He'll only charge me like $100 to make it the way that I want it, where this part is down that way, and he said he can do that like in a week. So that was, excellent customer service from Dan. So you got to appreciate, things like that when they're making it the way that you want to have it made. And again, you know, that's just the way I want to have it made. Maybe the way he got it made works best for you. I don't know, you know. You gotta let these things work themselves out. So get another piece of wood, and this shows an example of the other thing I wanted to mention. Sometimes you can find wood that's already cut where you wanted to cut it. That's the best type of wood, you know, to get the best cutting performance on, because it's already cut. You mightn't always be able to find that though, but if you can, when you find wood like naturally that's cut the exact way you want it, that's the best way to get it. Now, the other thing, before you want to cut the wood, one last thing. Now, many people know about this and that it works, but they don't know why. So I'm just going to explain why this actually works. So, when you got a knife and you're trying to cut through the wood, the most important thing in regards to performance is friction, and how that'll stop the knife from cutting. And the reason why that happens is, see, the molecules in the steel and the molecules in the wood, when they get like too close together, they form baby molecules, and then the molecules in the wood start nagging the molecules in the steel. You know, how come you don't stay home, you're always going out, and you leave the lid up on the toilet seat, and they start fighting and everything. There's a lot of conflict and heat produced, and anyway, that's a bad deal. So you don't want any of that. So what you got to do is prevent that from happening. So normally what I do is I use WD-40, and you want to put a good amount of it on, you know, because it don't take very many of these molecules to come together to really cause a problem. And like most good things, you know, if a little does all right, then a lot is better. So, you know, really get it on there, coat it really well, get the wood all nice and coated. Then with the blade, you want to give that a really good coating as well. And make sure you got it all coated, because any of it that's exposed and those molecules get together, you know, really bad. So again, like, you'll notice when that starts to happen, if you ever have the blade heat up when you're cutting, and sometimes that happens, right? You know, the friction produces heat, everyone knows that. But that's why, you know, the heat comes from all the conflict between the molecules. So anyway, we got that done. Get out of the way. Okay, sometimes this happens, and I don't have that quite figured out yet. But like, I've been using this blade now, you can see, for quite some time, and every now and again, you know, you'll go to find it and it'll be like this, where you'll find the blade's not the wrong way. Remember, I was talking to you before that I generally like it when the spine is thicker and the edge is really thin, but every now and again like this, and I don't know why this happens. So you'll see the Excalibur is now the wrong way, where the spine is down and the edge is up. There's really not a lot you can do there, and it's kind of unfortunate. But it's not Gavco's fault, because when I got the knife, it was the right way. So I think it's just one of those things, you know, it happens randomly from time to time, and there's not a lot you can do at this point. There's no, you know, use getting angry or whatever about it, you know. This is just one of the things. Knives go dull, you got to sharpen them. Sometimes this happens, and, you know, there's not a lot you can do. So at this point, basically you can buy another knife. The other thing I was thinking on, though, when I was talking to one of my friends the other day, he said maybe, you know, like, when a knife happens like this, it could be that that's for, you know, cutting behind you. So when, you know, if you're, say, walking backwards and you're clearing a trail or something like that, maybe that's what you can use the knife for. So if the knife does turn around and you find that, like, this happens, maybe you could use it for that. So if you ever had to, like, you know, cut when you were walking backwards, or, you know, that kind of deal, you could carry this knife. So you could carry this knife with the edge going this way, and you could carry another one, you know, that was like this, for when the edge is down that way, and then you could sort of cut normally. But, you know, unfortunately, sometimes these things happen, and like I said, just like knives go dull, or the edge chips or deforms a little bit, you got to learn to take care of it. So there's no real point in getting angry about it. Anyway, I was hoping to show you a video about how to cut through this, but I can't figure out how to do it well when the knife is like this. Like, when the knife is turned down like that, I can generally cut very well, and the piece of wood like this would probably only be anywhere between 3 and 5 hits, depending on the cut placement and grain of the wood. But when the knife is like this, I haven't quite figured out how to do it yet, because I just don't get the penetration. The other thing I was thinking on is, like, maybe I could have one of my friends throw the piece of wood at me, and I could sort of, you know, like, cut it from behind. I'm not quite sure, don't have that technique down yet. But anyway, hope you learned something from this video about, you know, knives and that kind of stuff. And again, I just sort of want to stress, this is all, you know, like, personal opinion and preference and that kind of deal. And you really got to, you know, figure out what works best for you, and it'll all work out in the end.